Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to start. Just before we start, for all of those of you who prefer to listen to the talk in German, there is a live interpretation. If anyone is interested, you can ask for headphones to have the translation. The talk will be in English. My name is YOEL GAMZOU. I'm very happy and very honored to be here today and to interview my old friend. And although he doesn't know it, I would say my mentor, probably unknowingly and anonymously of many years. We haven't seen each other 10 years till before today. And it's a big honor for me to be sitting and sharing the stage with him because it's a bit of a closure of a circle somehow. I'll never forget the day about 15 years ago. I was very, very young and I got an email out of the blue from a man I did not know from Holland who said, I heard what you said about Mahler and I thought it was interesting, can we meet? And at the time, not many people thought that what I said was very interesting. And so I was very flattered and very, very, very thrilled. But then what I didn't expect was the conversation that followed when we met at the bar of the Adlon Hotel in Berlin. Really changed my life, and I know one should be careful with superlatives, but it really did in many ways. And I remember in that conversation I was trying to figure out how this man stands and how he stands to things and what his opinions are, and I realized very quickly that we will be good friends because I couldn't put him in any box that I knew. I tried to figure out whether he's a left-leaning or right-leaning or liberal or conservative, and he wouldn't respond to any of these boxes, which made me admire him even more. And then when I asked him, so where do you actually see yourself? He said, I'm a European humanist. And it took me about 15 years, and I'm starting to understand what he meant with that. But I'm also starting to understand that of the many that say it, he actually truly meant it. Rob and I are united by, I think, a lot of values, but also by, we realize right away that to me, Gustav Mahler has been a great idol and great guide, and to him, Thomas Mann in a similar way, and we've connected on that very, very quickly. When I thought, should I say about Rob when we start, I realized that it's basically impossible because I could tell you all the things he does. I mean, Rob is a theologian, he's a historian, he's a writer, he's a philosopher, but none of these things really matter because it is the how that is the thread that goes throughout his work. The absolute commitment to integrity, the commitment to sticking to what you believe in, even if it does not correspond to trends or to fashions, not ever bowing to what the world of commerce wants you to do in order to be successful, at perhaps even an existential price. It's a quality that very few people have these days. And I'd say that with, again, you trying to be careful with these kind of terms, I would call you a Renaissance man because you write about everything because it's all connected. And that's these are the kind of models that I've always looked for. People who connect the things in ways that make it understandable to me why we're doing what we're doing rather than just sticking to facts and what people now call knowledge, which I would say is information. Rob has always rejected the world's desire for simple answers. You will also see there will not be short answers. And I've always admired him for exactly having the courage to say what people want to hear or not want to hear, but mainly also having the courage to endure contradictions and his own ambivalences, rather than offering answers that are easy to catch and easy to take along. I think I'm a musician by trade, and I think what has also united us is the fact that you have always seen art as an important pillar in what you see as the cultural identity of Europe. And it is this joint heritage that unites us. Rob always says when you ask him where he's from that he's a European, and I couldn't agree more. Shortly after I met him, I read his book that at the time everyone I mentioned who told me, oh my God, not that dreadful book, which made me, of course, even more curious to read it. And it is a true masterpiece. And it's funny because I read it on the last couple of weeks twice in order to prepare for this talk. And it is one thing to read a book that is truly excellent, but it's another thing to see a book that ages well. It is now almost 20 years after it was written, and it could have been written yesterday. In fact, it would have been even better if it was written yesterday, as in it feels like it was. And it truly changed my life, and I will tell you a lot about this book because you can't buy it today at the shop, but therefore you should buy Rob's new book that I will tell you less about, but Rob I'm sure will more. There are some copies there which he will very kindly be willing to sign at the end of the talk, and I really, truly recommend them, not just because I admire him so much, it will change your lives too. The book is called, in English, The Word That Conquers Death, Stories on True Greatness, and it's currently not yet available in English, but it's available in German at the shop, which you will see at the start. I would like to start with a first question on that I would like to start with a quote from your old book that I think is quite pertinent to what we're going to talk about. It is, as many quotes from this book, related to Thomas Mann. And it is about the last time Thomas Mann met his publisher in Zurich in 1934. Sami Fischer, a very, very renowned publisher who formed generations of readers. And they talk about a common acquaintance, and Fischer says to him, "Oh, this man, he is not a European." And Thomas Mann asks, "What do you mean by that? What does it mean, not a European?" And the answer is, he has no understanding of the great humanistic ideas. Are we naive or detached or maybe outdated to still yearn or strive or even think of the term humanistic values in our time?
But who are the we?
That's for you to answer.
Yeah, no, but that's the key of the problem. I think that the topic of our conversation is, which is a great topic, will humanism survive the 21st century? But of course, the opposite is true. Will the 21st century survive without humanism? And the answer is quite simple. The answer is no. Why is the answer no? Because European humanism, with its deep religious roots, is that set of values and virtues which gives meaning to our life. So then the question is, how come that we have given up on European humanism, which already was, what Thomas Mann wrote was this in memoriam for Sami Fischer, and it was for him the key eye-opener. Yes, indeed, this is what European humanism is all about. We have given up on it, right? And in terms of the...
Have we?
Oh, well, look, one news, if you're not watching social media, but just an old-fashioned newspaper will tell you that nowadays it is about technology, especially artificial intelligence. It's about making America great again, Israel great again, Russia great again, whatever great again. We see the collapse of the humanities. We see the self-inflicted, in my view. We see the lack of courage among public intellectuals to speak truth to power. We see the complete dominance of the paradigm of quantity. Quality is completely gone. Quantity has taken over. Everything is reduced to numbers. So if you see all of these things happening, you should not be surprised that at the end of November, for the next Institute, we organize a conference, Apocalypse Now. And because it's not only because of the great movie by Francis Ford Coppola, but I also refer to a great essay by the Dutch historian Johan Huizinga, In the Shadow of Tomorrow, which he wrote in 1935. And much to my amazement, already there he refers to the fact that there is a scholar, or an academic, whatever, who already said, why is it that young people should read books? They can refer on to the media, there is no television, to the radio. And I thought, okay, so this thing of not reading books anymore, because why should you? It was something much more easy. Was already there at 35. Well, we know what happened after that. I don't want to predict that soon we will have World War III, but that we are living in an extremely difficult period, and that this difficult and this dark period relates to the fact that, quote unquote, those who still care about the things we care about, well, or we're not doing our job good enough, which is possible, which is very well possible, and we are with not enough people, because, quote unquote, those where the power is, whether it's in media, in education, in the political, they don't care. They don't care, and you know, in the World War of which you are part, and the outsider, the kitschfication of high art, high culture. So I've been thinking recently, because of this artificial intelligence hype, which is pretty dangerous, I think, but I thought, okay, artificial intelligence. Okay, what if we start thinking about artificial wisdom, or artificial love, or artificial justice, or artificial friends? I mean, you can go through the line, and you come to the conclusion, if all these things are artificial, what are they? They are fake.
Well, we're coming back to what you were talking about, the spiritual aspect of humanistic value.
Yeah, but if those fix, then we realize that at least artificial intelligence is not connected to any values. That is what it makes so dangerous.
But my question is, in your book, you mentioned a quote by Herzen from 1850, who wrote that Europe is not only asleep, it's dying. This is 170 years ago. Do we have a cyclical tendency to see apocalypse now every 2 or 3 generations? Or is what we're experiencing now truly worse than ever?
Well, I mean, there's you can read Toynbee or whatever, you know, the world history is full of crisis. But the thing is that, okay, let me put it this way. The 6th of June last year, I happened to be in Argentina for my work. And on my cell phone, I could follow the commemoration service of D-Day there in Normandy. So there was Spielberg and Tom Hanks. You could hear the music of Saving Private Ryan. There were those very old soldiers who were there at D-Day on the 6th of June 1944. Later in the 90s, some already 100. They got the Légion d'honneur of Macron. There was the very old already, you could see it, President Biden. And it reminded me of the fact that 10 or 15 years before, maybe 20 years before, I was in Normandy. And you can see all those graves of those 10,000 of young American boys and Canadian boys, 17, 18, 19 years old, sacrificing their life to make sure that Europe can get rid of totalitarianism. And so when I saw this, I thought, wow, less than 100 years later, we are throwing away everything. Those boys, they indeed died for nothing. And it made me very upset and very angry. And I thought, I mean, what are we doing? And what is to be done, right? And it also made me realize I don't put much hope on the elites, whatever elites there are, because they are the problem. They don't have any incentive to change anything because they will lose their job immediately, right? So listen, where shall hope come from? Well, from the outsiders, from the outcast, from, you know, the things we try to do here. What you're doing here with your Humanities Festival has much more impact and much more worth to me than a whole year of education at the so-called university. Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned in your book, I think if I had to pick the word that you use most often in your book, it's probably the word truth and the value of truth, which you come back to from a Socratic perspective, but also you come back to it. And of course we can, I mean, nowadays that idea or that notion of truth is one of the things that have been hollowed most of their meaning. Yeah. And I'd like to read 3 short quotes from your book about this topic. You write, first of all, another quote of Thomas Mann, that you say that at the same time he makes the almost classical error of equating cultural conservatism, preserving a spiritual heritage, with political conservatism, maintaining an existing social order. And just a few pages after that, there's 2 very interesting sentences. One saying that aware that any attempt to express a new reality in an old language makes a lie of language, these men manage to create a language that reveals modernity, the supremacy of time, and a new perspective on human reality. Do you think that we need a new language to describe an old idea when it gets to truth?
Well, you as a composer and a conductor, you know about the meaning and the art of interpretation and how to be truthful to a composition, to a text. And you know the famous quote of Mahler and a few others, we know, the real music is not in the notes, it is in something else. So you're always in need of translation because, well, things can happen to language, things can happen to words. I mean, here is where the whole thing of... I mean, this is the disease of what happened to propaganda. This is what happens when politics is reduced to slogans. This is what happens when an intellectual mindset is infected by the politisering des Geistes, the politicization of the mind. This is why the poets are so important, because the poets are there to protect the meaning of words. So when in 2010, I wrote my essay, The Eternal Return of Fascism, which was then published in the American edition, To Fight Against This Age on Fascism and Humanism. When I wrote the essay in 2010 because I saw what was happening in my country, the Netherlands, with Mr. Wilders. And I thought, I will not allow anybody to say, ich habe es nicht gewusst. So I wrote this essay, I sent it to all members of parliament, to all members of cabinet, for free, here you have it. The response was extremely negative. A big article in newspapers, ROB RIEMEN should be ashamed of himself, the academic class, this guy has no academic credentials, what is he talking about? I mean, it was...
Well, that must be a proof that you were right.
Well, anyway, I wanted to take it as a compliment, but at the same time, as I wrote then in the American introduction to the American edition, you know, something goes wrong when we are not capable to label things as they are. So I already at that time, I had a huge problem with ongoing nonsense talk about populism, because this is the favorite hobby of academics. It's populism. What kind of populism? Is it right-wing populism? Is it radical populism? Is it whatever? And I thought, no, we're not talking about populism. Just say what it is. We're dealing with new...
But saying what it is, I mean, labeling is also a subjective endeavor. So, you know, is truth also subjective?
No, well, it depends. But
you can label something and it could mean something different to someone else.
No, it's not labeling. When somebody tells you, I love you, right? It's not labeling. It's an expression of an attitude. It's an expression...
It surely means something different to each one of us.
Well, I hope it means something to you.
To anyone.
And especially when you say these words to somebody else, that those words are truthful, right? And here is the power of language. The language are judging you. If you're right or if you are a liar. Now, but let me go back to this obsession with the disgrace of the intellectual class of not using words which they should have used, and you can use it in very objective terms. So when the book was out in America in 2018, I got a similar response, including the New York Times. And they told me, well, you know, you can say, no, we are America, fascism is a European phenomenon. So I said, well, it cannot happen here. Okay, well, okay, good. Okay, then the next, but next to that, you know, what you say about Trump is not right because Trump is not a Hitler. I said, well, you know, I don't claim he's a Hitler. I said he's a fascist, and that's something else. You have it in a variety of...
There we are talking language again.
Right, but here is the thing. Anyway, I pointed then out that if he said, well, he's not, because that's what we know in the movies. In the movies, a fascist is Hitler. Okay, so what about reading books instead? And then they said, well, but he's not fine. They said, it's in the language. When it's in the language, it will come out. Anyway, so yesterday I said to a friend of mine, I said, I would have been able to give everything. You know, if 15 years ago I would have been the fool, you know, and the self-arrogant, blah, 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 and that my critics were right, but my critics were wrong. Democracy, the same thing, right? If we do not know the meaning of what democracy is, then what we are talking about. If we do not know what the meaning of culture, and so on and so forth and so forth. And about truth, in March I was on my way to whatever, and I saw our leftist newspaper. Well, I mean, leftist, a quality newspaper, politically on the left, liberal, whatever you want to call it. And there was an announcement that the next day all the columnists of the day would come together, you know, for a promotion of the newspaper. But they had to do it on a theme, and the theme was the nice, the goodness, and beauty. And I thought this must be a mistake, because the three words are the truth, goodness, and beauty. But the newspaper decided, no, we are no longer interested in we replace it by nice.
But surely most people, even when they don't follow a truthful path, they're convinced they are. So the question is all, let's say, reusage of truth completely Machiavellian and cynical, or what happened? How did we convince ourselves?
But you have to make a distinction, Joël. I mean, there is a distinction between the scientific truth, you know, the paradigm of science. Yes, this is water, H2O, and whatever, and you cannot claim that it is gold or something like that, right? Scientific truth is based on facts. But there's also a thing called the metaphysical truth. And this metaphysical truth is a much more important thing because it's here's where the muses come in, right? I mean, here's where your work as an artist come in. Why is it that the muses are important and you devoted your life to it in a certain way? I devoted my life to it, at least to protecting it, because we are human beings. We're still human beings. And there is this thing called that we have a heart or a soul or whatever you want to call it. And everybody knows how difficult it is to express yourself when you're dealing with your deepest emotions. You start mumbling or there is nothing you know, but how to express yourself. Well, the muses will give you a language. It can be in poetry, it can be in music, it can be in a movie or whatever. That's one thing. The other thing is that due to the work of the muses and the language of the muses, they provide you this thing called imagination. Now try to imagine that you don't have any imagination. That you don't have any imagination. You're imprisoned in yourself. You're imprisoned in the situation. And next to that, a total lack of empathy, because you cannot even imagine the life of somebody else. Now, there's a famous anecdote by Joseph Brodsky, the great Russian poet, who once, he went to America, became befriended with Susan Sontag and others, and he gave a commencement address. And in this commencement address, which you can read in his essays in a room and a half, which is one of the best books I ever read, he said to the Americans, he said, look guys, I come from the Soviet Union. I know what censorship is. I've been in prison for it. But I'm here now in the so-called free world. And much to my horror, I discover that it was in the 80s, that nobody is reading books anymore. Let me tell you, he said, if a country stops reading books, it will pay for it with its history. And if individuals stop reading books, they will pay for it with their life.
Let's go back for a second to the muses and language. Is art then the new form of language that we can use to describe truth?
You do not describe truth.
Well.
No. There's you give expression to it. And that's something...
Then it becomes subjective by definition, because you mentioned...
But what's your problem with being subjective?
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
But every interpretation of the same piece of art that you've just mentioned is true for the person that is seeing it.
Hang on. There is your sense of the meaning of your life.
Is my sense.
Is your sense, right. But let it be a sense that makes your life meaningful, right? And which gives you a capacity to make your distinction between good and evil. The problem of our time, this was my example of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is not connected to any values.
But if we consider that the humanistic values that you were talking about are lost or are getting lost, then it must mean that what gives meaning to my life is based on or connected to collective values that give other people meaning as well. And is that connection the part that is being lost?
Say this again?
So you're assuming that, I would say that what makes us connected is the fact that we draw back to similar values that we both agree in, that we share, that we associate the same things with. So if something gives my life meaning for myself, surely it has to be relatable to another person for it to give their life meaning for us to feel as a community.
Well, here I respectfully disagree with you. Because it's very important to make this distinction. And what is the temptation of the culture of fascism, or the cult of fascism? In a world which is deprived of any meaning or whatever, and you still can come together. You're part of the movement, and with somebody whom you can follow, etc., etc., etc. We had last year we had Orhan Pamuk to give the Nexus lecture, and Orhan said, if people may choose between nationalism and socialism, well, of course they will choose nationalism, because nationalism you only have to be with all the Dutch or all the Turkish together, and socialism will tell you have to work. So here is the thing: in biblical language, we are all created in the image of God, and the idea of being human is to strive to become that person whom you used to be. Okay. If you don't like the biblical language or the biblical ideas, it's the same true in the work of Socrates. You know, there is the logos, and we have in our soul a spark of the same logos to which we can relate to. And so the difference between Socrates and Nietzsche is Nietzsche would say, you know, be who you are, but Socrates would say, you know, you should strive to become the person you should be. Now, and in that idea of, and so Thomas Mann and a few others, what worried them most was how to keep alive an idea that will unite humankind.
Exactly.
Yes,
that's what I meant.
No, but that unity cannot be based on something scientific or whatever, because that's quote unquote meaningless.
That means that the meaning has to be relatable for other people for you to unite them. That's exactly the point. So the meaning that I find for myself, if it's only my subjective interpretation, surely it is not relatable to others unless it's meaning that other people can relate to.
Well, I dare to say that in general, I say, okay, there is bad news and there is good news. The bad news is human nature does not change, right? So history will constantly repeat itself. And the whole idea that history will not repeat, it's a very silly idea. The good news is I'm deeply convinced that every human being has a sense of quality. Everybody knows if somebody is a real friend or not. Everybody knows if that person is really caring for you, and everybody knows if the work they are doing is really meaningful, yes or no. And so there is and there is no difference between a sense of love, or friendship, or truthfulness, or goodness. 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago, our time in Uzbekistan or whatever. We're dealing with humanity, and we're dealing with a species who knows these things. The problem is the brainwashing. It's the brainwashing as if these things do not matter. And the other thing, and related to the brainwashing, is so. Why is it that we have lost so many of these things? It was my ongoing debate with my dear old friend and my mentor, George Steiner. And George quite often loved to say, although he was one of the most erudite people I knew, listen, the humanities do not humanize, because we know the enter stories about SS's who could read Rilke and then the next day. Or in this book I refer to the story of Hans Frank, who was a great connoisseur of Renaissance art and knew Dante by heart and knew how to play the piano, and some Chopin and Beethoven. The next day had to make a decision how many Jews had to be sent to the gas chambers in Auschwitz. We know these stories, right? And we also know, so there is no silver line. But what my counter argument to George was, I said, well, George, you may probably never heard of, but there is a philosopher whom I really admire. His name is George Steiner, and he wrote some very interesting books. And what I learned from his books is that, again, you will be surprised, what I learned from his book is that art and culture are an invitation. An invitation, like love is an invitation. You cannot insist that somebody loves you. You can only say, look, I love you as an invitation, and then you hope that somebody will accept the invitation. The world of the muses, the world of the arts and culture, it is an invitation. Here we are, this is what we have to offer you. Use us, but use it wisely. But take away the invitation, take away that nobody will, that you will say no, that you will never say to somebody, I love you. There will be no love in your life. If the invitation of culture, which has been taken away, because we only want to believe in everything what is useful and everything what's powerful and everything what makes us rich, etc., etc., etc. Take away that invitation. The invitation has been taken away, or rapidly taken away, with an exception of the Humanities Festival. But you know, 100 people, and then we get into trouble, and we're dealing with, quote unquote. Look, I mean, yeah, Brussels, the European Union. Well, at the European Union, there's nobody who qualifies for me, you know, to be a European. They are all deprived of the idea of it. And one more thing, listen, who's the loser in the commission? The man or woman has to deal with culture and arts. I mean,
let's go back to culture and art. That's a great, turning.
Well, we're still there.
Yes.
We don't have to go back. We continue.
Exactly. We're still there.
Yes.
And you say in your book, very interesting, culture is the knowledge and shaping of these intangible spiritual qualities collected in the cultural heritage. Only those works that are themselves timeless are significant. They continue to speak to us from generation to generation because they are the only works that express a timeless reality, an idea. It is precisely this requirement, this characteristic of timelessness, that renders all of culture and all spiritual values defenseless. Culture has to be defenseless, purposeless, and disinterested. Do you still think that art can or should be apolitical?
Apolitical? Okay, again, when art has, you know, what Sartre wanted to believe, and Stalin insisted on, you know, this in the Soviet realism, you know, you have with a profound political, it stopped being art. But you cannot deny that the works of Thomas Mann, both Dit Zauberberg and Dr. Faust, and even Joseph and his brothers, are very political books.
But you do quote Mann saying, a good work of art can and will have moral consequences, but to require moral ends of the artist is to ruin his craft.
Yeah.
You still agree with that?
Well, you too.
That's another matter.
You disagree with me?
I would say one of the incredibly charming ROB RIEMEN contradictions in your book, which I love, is the fact that you say art has to have no end and no purpose, or should not be useful for something, which I couldn't agree more. But then you also do say that it's an invitation and it's the only portal towards a humanistic form of human dignity.
There's no
Is that not a function?
No, it's not a contradiction. The opposite is true. It has this quality that it can transform people, that it can change, that it can change the world. Is
that a goal? Is that when an artist writes? I mean, a writer writes a book, an artist paints a painting, composer composes a piece. Is changing the world, changing a person, creating a transcendental experience? Is that not already in a way a function?
Well, at least what the artist will try to do is using his artistic powers, well, to create a world of imagination. And I mean, look, in the Soviet Union, the poems of Mandelstam, Akhmatova, Dr. Zhivago of Pasternak, they had an enormous impact. And when there is a lot of discussion if Thomas Mann should have left, should have given up his German nationality, which he only did in 1936 and not in 1933. But one of his reasons was that he wanted to continue to publish his Joseph and his brothers, Joseph und seine Brüder, in Germany. And because it was a huge source of encouragement and consolation to people. So look,
the question is it about the goal the artist has while creating his art that determines whether it's functional or free, or is it disinterested, or is it the result it has in hindsight?
It could function like that.
Which way? Yeah, which the first?
Okay. Do you now? Let me put it this way. Wagner was pretty easy, but do you think that Mozart with Le Figaro intentionally, you know, wanted to give a political message? Maybe yes, maybe no. But he never compromised on the aesthetic value of the art.
How do we know that?
Well, I know. Yeah, I spoke with him yesterday, and Wolfgang said, "Of course, Rob. Yes, and no."
I think all art is compromised. They compromise first of all between themselves and their own human limitations all the time, and they compromise because an artist who tells me he never thinks while he's writing a piece about whether people are going to enjoy it is a liar. Because artists all want their message to be received, and the first. Well, wait a second.
If that's true, why is it that Kafka said to Max Brod, "Just burn the whole thing"?
Okay.
Why is it that Pessoa put the whole thing in a box and said, "I don't care"?
There is an exception to every rule, but generally, people that composed regularly their whole life in order to be performed, people that painted.
Well, they all have to make a living, like you have to make a living.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And people that had to make a living had to also make political compromises. Now the question is.
No. Why compromise? Why is it a compromise?
The question is the compromise in the form always a compromise on the integrity behind it?
But there is no compromise. What's the compromise in the Ninth Symphony of Mahler?
The compromise is that we now admire the Ninth Symphony of Mahler 100 years after he died. He never lived to even hear it.
Yeah.
That is the compromise.
But no, that's not a compromise. He died.
He died, and after many years of people not choosing to listen to his piece.
Okay, next topic. Come.
If that's a sign it's becoming uncomfortable, now I'm getting even more interested. No, but
I'm not getting involved, but you know, a thing called time,
Okay.
and we only have 5 more. We have 5 more minutes, my friend.
I think I've got the time under control, don't worry. So in your book, you often talk about Socrates and the whole idea of the philosopher king, and you even finally, after many, many pages of not really kind of revealing whether you agree with him or not, you do share with us your disagreement with his vision or with his realism. Yes. And in your last book, you quote Shelley saying, "Poets are the unacknowledged legislator of the world," which I think was a beautiful quote. I wish it was true. And in a time where we see...
But they are unacknowledged.
Exactly. Well, I mean, they're unacknowledged, but are they legislators is another question. But in a time where we don't see philosopher kings, we see buffoon kings or tycoons or tech tycoons and so on and so forth, setting the trends and so on and so forth. What is the role of the poet? What is the role of the intellectual or the philosopher in our time?
First of all, to defend the meaning of words. Speaking truth to power, protect the world of ideas, offering the gifts of the muses, because the muses, they need the poet and the artist. And I love this phrase by Cicero in his Tusculan Disputations, cultura animi philosophia est. The origin of our word culture comes from this phrase, cultura animi philosophia est. The cultivation of the human soul is the quest for wisdom. And this is what universities are supposed to do. But again, the culture is compromised, the soul, what are we talking about? Quest for wisdom. So here, but if that is what... Look, the whole universities come from this proud word universitas. And universitas was intended to give everybody, before they start to work on getting the skills of a profession, to have this kind of general knowledge. Now, again, Nietzsche already in 1874, when he gave his 5 lectures on the history of, on the future of education, he was still at Basel as a professor, and the student organization asked him, the small professor with this big moustache, if he could give a lecture on the. He said, "Of course, I'll do it." And then he quintessential Nietzsche says to the students, he said, "I pity you. I pity all of you, because the school of civilization is over. Education will be reduced to what's good for the state and what's good for the economy. And you'll be happy with it, because the only thing you're interested in is making money, and if possible, a lot of money." 1874, right? I mean, so, and all of that is not only more true than ever. Go to the Shanghai list of so-called universities, but it's embraced.
What do you expect from a philosopher in 2025?
The quest for wisdom. And the good thing is, you will not find the philosophers in the academic world. That's the good news, right? It is not that difficult to be a philosopher. You have to ask questions, and you have to wonder. That's how it starts. And then you can go to a bookshop and you can start reading. This is how Spinoza did it. This is how Nietzsche did it.
So do you think art and artists and intellectuals can actually save our time?
You can. No, okay. It's the only way out. As we started, can humanism survive the 21st century? No, the question is, can the 21st century survive without humanism, which includes all the things we have been talking about? And if we, again, it's the only thing we have. Now, I know perfectly well, I mean, if you listen to the rhetoric of what's coming out of the White House, you have this Jewish guy in the White House, Stephen Miller, who saw all those movies of World War II, and for, okay, Eichmann is my man, and he's now copy-pasting everything of Eichmann, right? And if you listen to Steve Bannon and or Pete Hegseth, and all that to save Western civilization. Well, I can tell you, Mr. A.H., who came from this country a while ago, also wanted to have a unity of Europe, and but so okay. So then one more thing: to take away the lies. There are too many lies going on. Take away the lies, and I'm also deeply convinced by the experience we have, because it must be very difficult now to be a teenager and to be in your 20s. It must be endlessly more difficult than at least when I was in that period of my life, due to this horror of the social media, which are now acknowledged as being digital drugs. And although we spend billions on fighting narco and cocaine and whatever, we give those kids, when they are very young, this digital drug. But so the things are going wrong. The things are going wrong on the supply side, not at the demand side. People, especially younger, they want something else. But what to go to? Don't go to, I said, please don't go to a university, because they're using you, they take your money, and it has no reason at all. So well, my father was a union leader, so I grew up with strikes, and I strongly believe still this strike. So that, and then well, again, you know, if you had your 50 minutes of flattery on me, there was 1 minute on you. I mean, the work you're doing, you know, being yourself, your composition, and of course, you know, listen, it's, as you know all too well, it's not nice to be the outsider. It's not nice to, but you know, Robert Frost's this beautiful poem, you know, The Road Not Taken. And Spinoza at the end of his Ethics, all things excellent are as difficult as rare.
And lonely.
And lonely, yeah, but who cares, right?
He did.
Steiner, this is my last remark. We have still 30
I have one more question for you. You're not getting away from this so quickly.
But we
and I have 5 more minutes for it. So I'm gonna,
okay.
So I'm going to ask my last question. And we're going to start with a quote from your last book, which again, I very much recommend you buy on your way out. You're quoting your friend Elisabeth Mann-Borghese, the daughter of Thomas Mann, saying, "The utopians of today are the realists of tomorrow, and the realists of today will tomorrow be dead." And my question to you is the following. As I've told you before, one of the thinkers and intellectuals that, or I'd say Renaissance men that have formed and shaped my life most is the English poet William Morris, unfortunately now mainly known as a designer of wallpaper, but originally a poet. And after a whole life of going through so many phases, whether it was socialism, whether it was the arts and crafts movement and so on and so forth, came to actually write his magnus opus, which was shortly before his death, which was a utopian novel about a world where art is the only currency that matters, and that art and craftsmanship, and there are no possessions and there are no machines. He very much resented the Industrial Revolution, and like Socrates, obviously he wasn't actually showing a roadmap. He was painting an ideal that was, of course, not realistic, but it was an ideal to follow. And I wonder, have we lost our ability to conjure ideals, or otherwise, why has the idea of utopia become so out of fashion?
Well, that I do not know, but what I do know is the following, and this is a direct answer to your question. The quote of Elisabeth Mann came after the end of her next lecture in 1999. I had invited her to be in the footsteps of her father. Father gave his lecture minor sight. I said, why don't you do the same? Anyway, and she did a wonderful lecture, and she ended with this quote. And I used the quote at the end of a chapter in which George Orwell is my protagonist, because protagonist is the dystopian figure. But then, 6 years after the book was published, he wrote a review on a book of Burnham, The Managerial Revolution. And so 6 years later, I mean, that's not really, you know, so he did it on purpose, writing this review. And because what he discovered in this book was that this guy was the man who wanted to promote an idea which imprisons us all the time. It is as it is. Accept the fact. There's nothing you can change. This is the system. Just obey and deal with it. And Orwell then says, no. And so then he reveals himself to be a utopian and said, listen, you can never accept the fact that because it is as it is, you have to deal with it. It is as it is, and therefore we'll do something different. And so it is this attitude of there is no reason for us whatsoever to accept the things as they are now. This political class, we are not China. We can get rid of those people. These silly university things, don't go. Let them go to hell. You don't have to go to TikTok or Instagram or whatever. I mean, you can still use your brains and do these things, right? I mean, so that's... it's a very optimistic book, and my protagonist was George Orwell, who said, you can do things in a different way.
So maybe your next conference after Apocalypse Now should be Utopia Now?
No, okay, so go back to your room, read the Bible, and the last book, it ends, the Apocalypse of St. John ends with the New Jerusalem, right? And the new earth. And
Utopia comes after the Apocalypse?
In the book, at least, yes. Why not?
Thank you very, very much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to ask any questions? We have 15 minutes. I'm happy to. Are you happy to take questions in German as well, or should I translate?
Oh, no. In German is no problem.
Okay, in German or English, anyone?
Thank you. Thank you, Rob and YOEL. That was very thought-provoking. I agree with you that humanism in Europe has a very important role to play, especially with the rise of authoritarianism in America. I work in tech and human rights, and I resonate a lot with everything you said about artificial intelligence, especially working more with the technical side of it and the development there. But I'm also wondering if you could touch upon how humanism engages with post-colonialism or anti-imperialism or anti-apartheid movements, especially as Europe has a more important role to play in the world now. That would be great. Thank you.
Oh, I mean, thank you for this question. It's a very, very good question. Well, you know, every country, every culture has to deal with its own original sins, right? The original sin in America is slavery. The Arabic world has their own original sins, and colonialism and whatever is an original sin of Europe. But here's the thing: the idea of Europe was always an idea cultivated by a relatively small group of people. It was never a very popular thing. Well, first of all, they had to deal with the religion took over, and the church was. Then we call this period of the Renaissance, and for me the most threatening original sin of Europe now is the return of nationalism, and all those movements. So here's the thing: why is it that the kind of European humanism I would like to, as being the small dwarf on the shoulder of great giants, right? The only thing I try to do is to transmit what I learned and what they told me, is that a different world is possible, and that this different world. I mean, so after World War II, no, already during the World War, no, even before, in 1938, Thomas Mann, Herman Boch, and other people came together and they said, 1938, they said, there will be war. America will be part of the war. When the war, America have to win the war. When the war is over, we cannot leave it to the political class, we have to help them. 38. And so they created a small booklet entitled The City of Men. And in the City of Men, they came with the argument, and out of that grew the United Nations, that we need a world government. Because this nationalism, we need a world government. Well, I admire the fact that it was so prophetic on all these things. But then the war was over. Thomas Mann left America very disappointed in 1953. The husband of Elizabeth Mann, Borghese, was a very Italian anti-fascist, much older than she was. He died in the 50s, Thomas Mann died in the 50s. And then Elizabeth realized, my dad, my husband, all those highbrow intellectuals, this is never going to work. A world constitution, what are those talking about? We have to make things much more concrete. So I have to narrow it down. And she was narrowing it down to, okay, what is it that unites the whole world? It's climate. We cannot do with climate. And then she never says, okay, but even that might be too difficult. She was one of the founding mothers of the Club of Rome. She said, no, let's deal with the oceans first. And so she became the grandmother, first of all, of an environmental movement. Secondly, she became the grandmother that the UN took a decision that the oceans are the heritage of humankind. No country can probably now have to do something the same with the moon, but so what I admire in her is this sense of, okay, wonderful ideas, now let's make it practical. And but always, again, you're always depending on individual.
Compromise.
That's not a compromise. That's being practical. You have something with compromise. Compromises. No, let me explain to you this. You're dealing with compromises at the very moment thing is becoming less truthful because it is compromised. This is just being practical. This is okay. We should have a world constitution, but that's only words, blah blah blah. Let's make it concrete. And so the whole thing now again with the idea of Europe, starting here with for me is a cosmopolitan idea was we need people coming together and let's put it in practice, as this young man is doing. Okay, next question.
When there is no nihilism, then we are in a phase of nihilism. So if there is no humanism, I think we are in a phase of nihilism. And my second question is, I would rather prefer the word of enlightenment instead of humanism. Humanism, in my mind, is naturally a very important word without any doubt, but slightly vague. So humanism is also part of enlightenment, but the real basis of our modern civilization, according to me, is rather enlightenment.
Okay, so on your first topic, I fully agree. Without humanism, we end with nihilism, so we can skip that part. I don't agree with you that enlightenment is. But first of all, I know you can say the same thing on humanism, but we have different forms of enlightenment, right? And the German enlightenment is not the same as the Scottish enlightenment and all these things. Now, the enlightenment was a very important and powerful development in our thinking about the world, etc., etc., etc. But you should not forget that the French Revolution was also, I mean, when you read Jules Michelin, was also an expression of the Enlightenment, and it ended with the Great Terror. And with Zygmunt Bauman, who wrote wonderful, important books, how there is a deep connection also between Enlightenment and totalitarianism. My problem with, last night I had a dinner with my old friend Michael Ignatieff, who fortunately is now here, as he was kicked out in Budapest. And as a good old liberal, he's defending the Enlightenment and the institutions all the time. And he accuses me of German Kulturpessimismus. Well, and then I try to explain to him that the institutions can only be there if because the foundation are those values, and the values are. Because here is the thing: the Enlightenment we take a subscription on reason. Reason will tell us everything. Now, Pascal, Dostoevsky, Kierkegaard already explained well that reason alone cannot make a distinction between good and evil. It's something different. Spinoza already knew that the highest form of knowledge is a form of intuition. So at the very moment we give up the notion that our key values are transcendental, because otherwise you cannot unite people, right? Otherwise, when our most important values are no longer transcendental to us, you get this form of instrumentalism, and you get this form of might make right, etc., etc., etc. So that's why I strongly prefer. I embrace enlightenment. We need much more enlightenment, but I embrace, by preference, the whole mindset of European humanism, because it is not disconnected from religion, and the Enlightenment movement is on purpose disconnected from religion.
In the back.
When you mentioned Morris, he ends that work with saying, "But that's just my ideas as a middle-class man." How do we enfranchise these ideas beyond just the invitation to be received by philosophers and artists?
Oh, I think that's very interesting. I think it's all in the book, actually. I couldn't. I'm so happy someone actually knows Morris. So the novel News from Nowhere, 1890, I strongly recommend. You're right. He ends it like that, as a good Englishman with a little bit of understatement. Obviously, I mean, it's not German, hammer it in your face and overwhelm you with ideals. It's all in there for you to find by yourself, and that's exactly the whole point. It's not a book that is there to tell you what is right or wrong. It's a book to show you how many different options you have into defining meaning. So Rob was talking about meaning to yourself. He finds meaning first and foremost. He said that the only two things that could be transcendental are art and nature. And I think that is, for example, something that every single person can fill with meaning and content in their own way. And that's what I love about Morris, that it's also an invitation to go on a journey without prescriptive answers on what the end destination is. I think there was someone in the back.
Thank you. Yeah, about compromise, I think I got the part where you think that if you make something political, or if you make your art political, then you're leaving something behind, like comfort or something. Like you're deciding, as if you were deciding to live like a comfortable life in contraposition to a political kind of art. But I found it interesting when you said, on the other hand, that the most important art pieces are timeless. And I think that's the point where compromise comes into play, because I think political means always in context. It's always situated, like everything that is political has a context. And so an art piece that can be very influential, for example, can be timeless because also history repeats itself. So it can be adapted to new contexts, But I think the political part of it is not only making compromises, but like actually being inside of the context you live in. So
is this
what do you think about it? I don't know, both. Maybe more about the timeless art pieces and the context.
Look, politics is about the world in which we live, and it's based on how to live in a human society, and what our own responsibility is. The books of Jane Austen, are they compromised, as you well? No, they are not compromised. They are just wonderful, beautiful stories, and the movies are equally. But they are also political, because it is about the rights of women, and so quote unquote, there's a kind of eternal truth in those works. Goethe's Faust. Is it compromise? No, of course it's not compromise. But he is creating a myth, which even Homer, the Odyssey, and so all of us who are frustrated by the fact that, that the book is not on the bestseller list and it's not reviewed or only negative reviews, and I tell them, look, Nietzsche sold only 420 copies. He had to pay his own publishers because they wanted to pay. So what is it that you want? You want to be, so the quality. I mean, how is it possible that we can still read and try to understand Plato? How is it possible that we still can listen to music created hundreds of years ago? I mean, and that's because it's this transcendental power. It's still speaking to us. It's still speaking to us. The poems of Shakespeare, they are still speaking to us. And so, and because they are still speaking to us, they are constantly reminding us of Rilke, Du sollst dein Leben ändern. And that's not a compromise. That's the power of art.
I would just like quickly to add something before everyone around thinks that I'm a great fan of compromise.
Yes. That was my idea. Yes.
It's so nice to know how to provoke someone and that it works. I mean, sadly, the tragedy of my life that I'm capable of literally zero compromise. But that's why I'm in the same list like Rob, looking at the 400 books that we have not sold. But the truth is, I think, to be honest, in my personal opinion, all art is political. I think that apolitical art is an illusion. I think the moment you make a piece of art about a human being on a stage, in a painting, in a book, it is political by definition. And so
but it's not party politics.
Well, that way, if we could do the next hour about what is political, but the thing
you can leave that to Jascha.
What matters about things being timeless is the fact that whether Shakespeare was a man or a woman, whether he was black or white, whether he lived in England or in France, no one cares. The fact is, we can read his stories today. I don't care. We can read his stories today, and they mean something to us because they're deeply human. And art that means something to people in different generations will find a way to survive, regardless of what context it was created in, if it's great art. So I think that my only question about political, let's say, compromise in art making is about people that were forced to create propaganda for a certain regime and what kind of situation, what kind of pressure they were living in, and whether they were able to still push their ideas through despite a form that seemed to comply with certain rules or other things. And I think great people made revolutions in many different ways. And I think the more subtle ones and the more drastic ones are equally legitimate. But I think great art is always political, and it survives if it means something that has to do with the human condition and which translates beyond centuries.
Amen.
Thank you.